Do you like games that allow themselves to be broken only using tools the game itself provides? Do you think being able to hack reality Matrix style would be awesome? Maybe you're curious about uploading your mind and being to the internet serial experiment lane style? Or maybe you don't care about any of that and just want to chill, drink booze, and do drugs. Well, in L's Heart.Break you can do all of that, and it's a game like none other I've ever seen. Now, I'm sitting here and I'm kind of stumped with this first paragraph where I should introduce what kind of game L's Heart.Break is, because there's nothing quite like it. It's an indie project from a bunch of Swedes, the only one I'm familiar with being the painter and musician El Huervo, who you might recognize as Beard from Hotline Miami. He's honestly one of my favorite painters, and visually the game sure is worthy of his reputation, because it's wonderfully stylized in this signature vibrant style and is unmistakable with anything else. Gameplay-wise, it's some sort of a hacking game, but with how exploration heavy it is, and all the freedom it gives to experiment with the game systems and even code itself, makes it feel like an immersive sim, except when most immersive sims lean towards being stealth-based shooters.
What a shame.
L's Heart.Break is a lot more like a point-and-click adventure. And story-wise, it's a small tale about a young adult trying to find his place in the world, which depending on your own experiences, can be quite relatable. In L's Heart.Break, you play as Sebastian, a guy with a nose redder than hair was. The game starts with Sebastian receiving a phone call during his birthday, telling him that despite his lack of qualification, he's got a job no one else showed interest in, so he has to take a boat ride next morning to a backwater island of Dorisburg. Right upon arriving, the player is free to do whatever, and isn't really given much direction. While it can be confusing in terms of gameplay, it accurately mimics what it feels moving to a completely new place. Of course you can just start aimlessly wandering around, but if you have the precious gift of common sense, you might come up with the idea that you need to find a hotel to stay at. And to do that, you could ask random passengers for directions, or possibly visit a tourism center. Upon arriving at Hotel Devochka, you get a random room and it's a shithole. It's literally a bathroom. There's not even a bed or anything. So go to the manager to complain, being utterly bewildered, yet she is completely unfazed. Apparently stuff like that is a normal occurrence. And instead of switching the room or anything like that, she gets an IT guy of all people to fix the door, because that's the part that's wrong, it's the door that's broken. And sure enough, the guy comes up, presses a couple of buttons on this Shadowrun style cyberdeck device, and then the door leads to a perfectly normal, if a little cramped hotel room. The next morning Sebastian gets told that someone was looking for him. It must have been his contact from work, so it's time to start exploring in an attempt to find that guy. And again, you're free to explore wherever you want, but if you need any pointers you can always ask NPCs for directions. And I find pretty cool thing for immersion. There's no quest log or map markers in the game. The map is an actual item you have to find, and even then it's fairly vague, so you have to get familiar with the town and its landmarks on your own. And if you're looking for anything specific, NPCs can give you actual directions in regards to various points of interest you might find near your destination. Dorisburg is not a very large town, but there's a ton to be explored. Every building can be entered, and all of them are full of details. I'd recognize a bunch of Easter eggs in the environments. For example, being familiar with Swedish Columbia, the label that releases El Huervo's music, I found posters of both him and other artists from the same label, like Triobelisk. I'm sure I missed some too. I had also found what seemed like El Huervo's house in-game, and my favorite of all, a painting that's straight up a pathologic reference, showing the polyhedron in the abattoir. I remember posting a screenshot of that on Steam and Reddit years ago, and as far as I'm aware, I haven't really seen anyone point it out before me. I could, of course, be proven wrong. In any case, a reference to past logic is a clear indicator of superior taste. The game is pleasant to explore when it comes to presentation as well. It has this unique style filled with vibrant colors, thick outlines and sharp edges. Even the camera rotates in 45-degree intervals to show the stylized objects from optimal viewing angles. optimal when it comes to composition and aesthetics at least. It can be a bit wonky from the practical point of view, with the way the camera just snaps to specific spots, making some foreground objects obstruct your vision. And the aesthetic itself is this sort of blend of 2010s hipster fashion, you know, beanies, scarves, headphones, bright shoes and vintage looking jackets, mixed together with retro futuristic technology, thick CRT monitors, chunky consoles, floppy disks, neon lights, and all that goodness. The game does not only look, but sound good too. It has a pretty wide soundtrack. I recognize quite a few tracks from El Hervo, which I'm a fan of, as well as some more chiptune tracks that I'm less familiar with.
Want to hear the most annoying sound in the world?
When you eventually meet your war contact, he seems like he can barely be bothered to explain things. But basically the job that Sebastian got is to sell cans of Wellspring soda, a brand that no one seems to really like. So the whole thing is to just fuck around and bother random people trying to sell them your product. Pretty shitty as far as jobs go. Work's work though, and unskilled laborers can't afford to be choosers. The game starts ramping up a little when you meet this girl called Pixie. You go around partying with her, trying to talk her up, only to find out she's already dating someone called Ivan? Regardless of that, Pixie is the most empathetic character to Sebastian in the game so far, so if you decide to follow her around a bit, you'll find out that she's a part of the local hacker group, and the best bet to get closer to her must be to join the said group. Or at least that's what Seb seems to think anyway. I personally didn't even think about trying to hook up with her, especially when she's already in a relationship. But I guess it can also be seen as just this young adult search for a place where he can belong. Just going places, trying things, and the hacker group just so happened to be the most receptive people to him. Anyway, Seb knows nothing about programming, so it's time to find one of those modifier devices. That, like anything else in the game, can be accomplished in many ways. A modifier is this portable device that lets you jack into nearly any object in the game and rewrite its code. It's straight up live hacks, but you're actually hacking live. I find it really cool how people get this saint-like halo while rewriting reality itself. Getting a modifier is the point that opens up a whole new dimension of the game and introduces the main mechanic, which is coding. You don't necessarily need to know actual programming to be able to play Heart.Break, as it uses its own coding language called Sprach, which I believe might be based on BASIC, which is supposed to be pretty basic. The game does have some tutorials to coding basics, but even the tutorials are something that need to be found. The key here is to be inquisitive. Heart.Break rewards exploration like no other game. You don't just find new places, items and people, but by hacking various objects you can discover various variables, functions, and other code snippets that you might be able to repurpose for your own code. As long as you manage to read the code, you're good. That being said, I'm not sure how good of an entry point to coding Heart.Break is, because knowing real-world coding does help. The first time I played Heart.Break, I was just starting to learn coding in C++, and I found the game to be pretty confusing. Now, as I came back years later, I have experience coding in C#, Python, PHP, JavaScript, and while I still wouldn't consider myself any good in coding, I formed a much better intuition in regards to how code is supposed to work, especially in a language I'm less familiar with. If you're just starting out with coding, you might be happy with just being able to pass main story tasks. But if you're skilled enough, you can reprogram nearly anything in a game to your own tune. I'm not even that great, but I fairly quickly managed to hack my beer to give me $10,000 every time I take a sip, so I could afford some of those overpriced sneakers. Screw work, I'm no longer selling that soda, when I can get rich by getting drunk. If you ever coded before, you might realize that there are many ways to accomplish the same tasks when coding, and the same goes for Heart.Break. Different objects have different functions that they can perform, so you kind of have to figure that out through trial and error. Let's take something fairly straightforward as an example, like unlocking doors. If you hack a key, you will notice that each key has a 5-digit code assigned to it, which is pretty much a password to an invisible keypad every door has. That means that you can make a brute force lockpick if you make a key cycle through every numeric value up to 99999. While it's doable, it's very inefficient, because scrolling through all these numeric values can take an entire in-game day. Another, a lot more efficient way I found was one that required a lot more creativity, exploration, and poking into different computers. The police computer has a function to detect rooms and items in them. Then the hotel computer has a function to unlock doors. What I needed was an item that had the ability to remotely connect to computers, which in my case was a radio. I made the radio connect to the police computer and use its functions to make an array of all the doors in the same location as I am in. Then I used the hotel's computer's command to unlock all the doors in the area and voila! I found that this method wasn't completely universal and couldn't unlock some specific doors, possibly due to them not being connected to the police. At least that's my guess. So then I remembered my hotel's room leading to the wrong place and came up with a much different solution. I can just hack the locked door, see the name of the location it leads to, and replace that location on some other unlocked door to lead there. Simple. And I'm sure there's plenty more ways to do the same, and that's just one task. You can do nearly anything I can think of. The ceiling is your creativity. If you're feeling adventurous, you could take a step deeper and start hacking the game's files. I hear there's plenty that can be done there too. For example, I just opened a random file and instantly found a way to make Sebastian never need to sleep. It feels like you can reprogram the whole game with enough determination. The only thing that didn't really do it for me is the ending. But to explain why I would need to delve into spoiler territory. If you intend to get through the game's lack of handholding and complete the game yourself, you might want to skip the story discussion and go to this timestamp. So, as Sebastian follows Pixie around, he gets to join this hacker group. The closest equivalent to them I could come up with is eco-terrorists, even if it might not be the most appealing one. They're breaking the law by hacking, but generally they're trying to better the world in some way. And the institution they're rebelling against is the computer ministry. They're actually the ones who invented modifiers and a whole lot of other stuff, but they also partake in all kinds of shady dealings, populist surveillance, and weird experiments. While hanging out with the hackers, Sebastian not only gets assigned to various unlawful tasks, but he also gets to simply hang out with these people and make genuine friends with them. One time Pixie is particularly upset, and that's because the ministry decided to do some experiment on her boyfriend Ivan, and Ivan, for whatever reason, is also complying with them. The hacker group gets invited to watch the experiment, and that experiment ends up evaporating Ivan with some giant death ray. That would be the jackpot if I did want to date Pixie instead, but I wanted none of that, so I was just thinking about how to make things right. But the next night, Sebastian gets visited by Ivan's ghost, and starts asking around if ghosts are a thing. The hackers don't even seem that surprised about it, because there was a story about one guy suddenly just vanishing without a trace, the only clue being that he might have somehow transported himself to the internet to live with his virtual girlfriend. And surprise surprise, that's exactly what Sebastian has to do too. Ivan's ghost left a broken code that allows you to upload yourself to the internet. He wasn't dead at all, but transported to the digital realm and heavily corrupted, so he couldn't get out himself. To fix things, Sebastian has to uncorrupt Ivan, and to let him out of the digital realm, Seb has to infiltrate the computer ministry and destroy one of the main computers there, the Heart. And that's where the game style comes in. The computer has some unfinished code in which you need to type else Heart.Break. And then the whole system goes down. Ivan is saved, but the ministry is after Sebastian now, so he has to flee Dorisburg. He just gets on the first ship and that's it. No goodbyes, no closure, nothing. The game just comes to an abrupt end. While we did get a title drop at the end, I expected Elle's Heart.Break to be more involved with maybe romantic relationships, experiencing actual heartbreaks, possibly competing with Ivan for Pixie's love, but I didn't get all that much of that. Yes, there were a bunch of parties and socializing in the game, but little of it resulted in meaningful, well-written relationships and storylines. Sebastian just gets to be this newbie hacker guy who was just looking to fit in somewhere. And when he finally did, and actually accomplished something big, He just got shoved out of the group he just managed to fit in with. All in all, I expected L's Heart.Break to have a bit more going on when it comes to the story. But that doesn't outweigh the fact that the game's world is fascinating to explore, and the game's atmosphere is one of a kind. The story is basically just some extra flavor and guiding direction to an otherwise very unique and enticing sandbox. L's Heart.Break is a very immersive experience, and it's a good representation of what it feels to be a little lost in a new town, just starting out your independent life. I'm not gonna lie though, L's Heart.Break can also be a tough nut to crack. I had attempted to play the game twice before, and didn't get very far at all, simply because of how easy it is to get lost in it. Sometimes I would just get lost exploring the town, not being able to find the next plot thread to follow. Sometimes I wouldn't even manage to get myself a modifier to engage with the main mechanic. But when I did finally manage to crack the way the game works, I got very invested in it, kept wanting to see what else is possible, and I yearned to see more of the characters I got to know. Ultimately, L's Heart.Break is a game about systems. Everything has some sort of a system, whether it's the programming that you have to figure out, or the different people's schedules that you can learn, or the ways you can interact with various items and so on. The game is great if you just want to chill, but it's even better if you like looking for patterns, and even more so if you enjoy exploiting the systems for your own benefit. It just needs some extra attention and inquisitiveness. To this day, L's Heart.Break feels like an extremely overlooked game, so I'll be happy if I manage to get you at least somewhat interested to check it out. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.